Sure. I was born in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and my parents are from Davenport, Iowa. My family's from Davenport, Iowa. My dad happened to be working in Cheyenne part-time, on a full-time job, but on a part-time basis. So he was only out there for a short period of time, but that's where I happened to be born. So as soon as I was born, my mom and dad moved back to Davenport, and then I either lived in Davenport or Dubuque, and then moved to Iowa City for college. So for a native Iowan, as many people will tell you, I'm a big Iowa fan, but my bio always has that Cheyenne, Wyoming thing that always throws people off a little bit. Yeah, I did 4 years in Iowa City, graduated in 4 years. I was on the waiting list, they tell me, for the Iowa Law School, and I didn't want to mess around with that, so I had some options at other law schools, and Creighton was by far the best option. So I decided to come to Creighton, and the rest is history. It's been a great decision, been a great move by me, and very appreciative to Creighton for the education that I got. My parents told me that I should be a lawyer when I was a little kid because I would plead my case when I was being disciplined. I was largely unsuccessful, but they said, you really do a good job of setting forth your arguments. So I always kept that in the back of my mind. Then in Iowa City, I was on the Student Senate. I was elected to Student Senate, and that started to get me interested in legal matters. I started taking as many undergrad law courses as I could in Iowa City to see if I really liked it. I did, and so I pretty much had decided I wanted to be a lawyer before I graduated from undergrad in Iowa City, which really took a lot of pressure off in terms of trying to figure out what I want to do with my life, whatever. I knew I wanted to go to law school, so I was totally committed to that when the time came. I fell into the role I always thought I was going to do. I knew I wasn't smart enough to be a tax lawyer. I knew I didn't have the detail for corporate law, but I knew I wanted to be a litigator. I wanted to be in the courtroom, and so I geared my courses and I geared my performance in law school toward that. Did moot court as opposed to law review, that sort of thing, and so it really was an easy decision for me to make.
Was it still two sections back then?
Yeah, A and B. I was section B. I won't comment on whether that's the smarter section or not. No, I started off, I worked in the law library part-time, which was a great deal because I got to have access to the reserve book room. So you saw what people were checking out, you saw what the resources were, and then of course I knew what the resources were then in the rest of the library through putting books away at the end of the night, that sort of thing. And freshman year, we got our grades after the first semester, and that's when people started putting resumes out. So I started working at the law library, and then I moved to Mooresman, Fike, Davis and Schumacher, which was a law firm in the Continental Building that did primarily banking work and real estate work. It's stuff that I had no interest in, and so I lasted about a year there, and I was looking for other jobs, and I prepared resumes and took one to Bolin, Mullen and Walsh in the Woodman Tower. 6-man firm, kind of a boutique litigation practice, and as I was dropping off my resume, Mary Likes, who was a couple years ahead of me at Creighton in law school and then became a partner and became a district court judge later on, she saw me walk in. She said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I'm dropping off a resume." And she said, "Well, I didn't know you were looking for work." And I said, "Well, I'd like to make a switch." And she said, "Well, my brother Tom Gleason does the hiring here. I'll put in a good word for you." Next thing I knew, I had an appointment with Tom for an interview, and I got hired. And so I was hired in right before the start of the summer before my senior year, or my third year in law school, and loved the place, loved the people. It's where I met my mentors, basically. Terry O'Hare, who used to occupy this office, Tim Pugh, and Bob Mullen Jr. were really my three mentors at Bolin, Mullen and Walsh. Had a great career there. From 81 to 88. I joined the firm right out of law school, and then we merged with McGrath North in 1988.
what was the size of McGrath North with that merging?
McGrath North was about 30 lawyers when we merged. So at that point then, Mary Likes had joined our firm. So they brought over Mary, myself, Mike Mullen, and then the 4 partners. So we went from 30 to about 37 or 38. And then it's continued to grow since then. First got involved in a public service committee for the Omaha Bar Association and did very little for it, but just attended a few meetings, got the feel of things. And then I got busy with work, and my career took me away from the Bar Association, away from those activities. And then at some point when I began to have a little bit more time on my hands, a little bit more free time, I put in for the executive council for the OBA. So I was on the executive council for the OBA for several years, and then that turned into the opportunity to be OBA president. And then I completed that, and I thought, well, let's see what the executive council for the state bar is about. And I didn't contact anybody, didn't try to get the skids greased or anything like that. I just put in my name for the election, to which Jane Schoeneke, who was the executive director at the time, was very interested. Why does this guy want to be on the executive? Who is this guy? And I ended up winning and won the whatever district seat it was, 2 or 4 or whatever. And Jane came up to meet me, and really it was a check me out interview type of thing. Are you going to be a team player, or are you going to be some sort of wild card? So, but Jane and I got along well, and God rest her soul. And that's how I kind of got involved in the Bar Association. And from executive council of the bar, then I got approached for the presidency. Yeah, quite often people look at the OBA presidency as kind of a social director type thing. And there's that aspect of it, because one of the things that the OBA does, obviously, is promote collegiality among the members and so on. But it's also a great opportunity to reach out to members of the bar to try to accomplish something, because you do have their attention. And the bar newsletter gives you that opportunity to write basically to the membership. And so I was thinking about that, and my articles that I would write for the newsletter tended to be more, I wrote one on how we dress, and that sort of thing, rather than we've got an event coming up that you should go to. And I thought, if you want to leave your mark on something, you should do those types of things, take those opportunities while you have it, for that 1 year that you have it. And then I realized I was going to be out in a year, and what was my legacy going to be? And then I realized, okay, you got CLE coming on board. We don't have a CLE process yet. We ought to have a CLE event. The bar can easily do that and see what happens. I had no idea it would become as popular as it became. In the first couple of years, looking back on it, when we were in the spaceship at Creighton, it was a very modest presentation, to say the least. It got much better as time went on, and as Steve Severson joined the team then, I think after 2 years. So we're on our 16th year. He's been involved in, I think, 14 of those 16 years. Things got a little bit more structured, a little bit better to market to the Bar Association, and so we got some good response. Partially, yeah. It was under development, and it was getting up and running the year before me under Tim Engler. All the credit to that goes to Liz Neely. I mean, she's the one that really was the force behind the state bar, getting involved in that. But obviously, as president, I had some roles to play or something to do with that, and so we made sure it got in place and got solidified. But the concept was there and was growing and developing the year before me. So yeah, health insurance was a big deal, because it's such a great benefit for all the lawyers in the state. And it took some work on the part of Liz to get the Blue Cross involved, to get make sure there weren't tax issues and all those sort of things. But so that was one of the things that came on board on my watch. what I would tell you, I think, is one of the bigger developments on my watch when I was president of the State Bar was the lease, where we were, the bar's offices now, we rent from the Bar Foundation, State Bar Foundation, and there was an opportunity to go elsewhere. And so we looked elsewhere, and we looked consciously to see if we could get a better deal somewhere else. And we ultimately concluded that the best deal we could get, and the best thing for the Bar Association vis-a-vis the foundation, was to stay right where we're at. And so that was a big element of what I worked on during that year. Yeah, to respond to the question about, the differences between the State Bar and the local bar, the Omaha Bar, I put it this way: when I would go to State Bar meetings, or we would have our conferences or whatever, I made a concerted effort to try to sit with the lawyers from Western Nebraska, because I had already been exposed to the lawyers in Omaha and to a lesser extent in Lincoln, but I thought there was more I could learn from them. And so I had an opportunity to do that, and I found that the lawyers in central and western Nebraska are every bit as good as the lawyers in Omaha or Lincoln in terms of their performance, intelligence, capability, education, all those sorts of things. And in some respects, even better, because I'm always a little bit envious of those lawyers that can do everything. I'm a litigator. Like I said, I wasn't smart enough to be some of these other types of lawyers. And so I envy those lawyers that can probate a case, can handle an incorporation, can handle tax issues, and all working in the same general type practice firm. And then they go try a jury trial too. So the quality of the practice in the state of Nebraska is very high. And the example I always like to give is one of the things I had to do, or I didn't have to do, but I was permitted to do when I was president of the State Bar, was to testify before the Judiciary Committee at the legislature. And that was pertaining to judicial salaries, and there was, I think, another bill that was maybe the need for an additional judge here in Omaha, which we always need, at least one more judge here. And I had the privilege of being questioned by Senator Chambers. And Chief Justice Heavican was sitting right behind me, and sometimes he was talking to the chief in a question to me, and sometimes he was talking to me. But one of the things he asked me was, what was my experience with Nebraska judges? And I said, well, Senator, I practiced in Alabama, I practiced in Mississippi, I practiced in Louisiana, Texas. And he stopped me and he said, Mr. Paul, I don't need to know if you practice in all these poor states, in states where the quality of practice maybe isn't enough. He said, I would expect that our judges would be better than those judges in those states. And I said, well, if the senator wouldn't mind, I'd like to finish. And he said, all right, go ahead. Texas, and then California, Arizona, then I went up unfortunately, what McGrath North has allowed me to do is practice all over the country. And so I must have reeled off 20 or 30 different states, all through the Midwest, the Northeast, the West Coast. But I happened to start with Alabama and Mississippi. And so he thought I was just talking about the poor states that have less resources. And I wasn't. I was talking about the entire country. I meant it, and it's true and it's accurate to say that our judges in particular are as good as any state court judges in the country. And I had the privilege to make that point with Senator Chambers, and I don't know if that was what he was looking for, but I still had the opportunity to say it.
Rooting for the Cubs over?
Oh, you see, Davenport, Iowa, which is where I grew up, spent from almost when I was born to when I went to Iowa City, the University of Iowa. You were either a Cub fan or you were a Cardinals fan for baseball. And for football, you were either a Bears fan or you were a Packers fan. So I don't hide my allegiance to the Cubs and the Bears and University of Iowa, and I have the same kind of avoidance to the Packers and the Cardinals.
Even now, with Albert Pujols going back for his final season there, the Cardinals are
some,
going to be good this year.
Some people just don't know when to leave. So,
well, and then you get to see the Cubs AAA teams in Denver, right? So they come and play the Storm Chasers.
they're in Des Moines.
Oh, they're in Des Moines.
Yeah, but they do come to Omaha.
Yeah.
And so I have gone to see. Back when the Cubs had prospects, now they've got just kind of a rinky-dink farm system. But well, first of all, you mentioned the ethics seminar that I started or I developed or whatever. I couldn't do it without your help, and you play a tremendous role in that. So you're part of a three-legged stool there, and the other leg is Steve Severson, who has been a great partner in this throughout the whole 14 of the 16 years. So because of your efforts and because of Steve's efforts, what I do is very easy for me to do. And as most people know, they've ever been to the seminar, I always call my segment Recent Developments in Ethics or Professional Responsibility in Iowa and Nebraska. It helps us get ethics credit in Iowa and Nebraska. It also gives me an opportunity to look at decisions that have occurred in those states and report to the membership about those. So that's the intent of what I do. We've always had the guest speaker be someone that's other than, I would say, somebody from Creighton University. We tried to avoid that where we could. And we've had a lot of judges speak as guest speakers. Probably the best guest speaker event we ever had was the first time the Chief Justice of the Iowa Supreme Court came to Creighton to speak. And by the way, I mentioned Steve Severson and his contribution. Creighton University itself has contributed tremendously, and our seminar went from the rinky-dink to the big time when we moved into the Harper Center. And so we've been away from that a couple of years now because of COVID. We hope to get back to that next year. But it really, really made a difference to go there. It resulted in bigger crowds. It resulted in better speakers wanting to attend. And Chief Justice Mark Cady, who has passed away, was probably our best speaker because he went into a lot of the development of the law and history in the state of Iowa in terms of what Iowans, women, minorities, that sort of thing have done. So that's always been a substantive thing. And then Steve has been kind of the meat and potatoes, the nuts and bolts of things, because we wanted to have a seminar that gives you a little bit of the boring stuff. And I don't mean that to say that Steve is boring, but some of the dry stuff. And you can't have a good ethics seminar without some of the drier parts of ethics, the nuts and bolts, as I say. The guest speaker gives us some variety. And then my approach is to take ethics and not make it as dry if we can. But by the same token, for as many things as I've done where I've had a funny commercial that I've featured or a case that people will look at, for as much of those things as I've done, I've also been able to talk about cases that have really put lawyers in a bad light or sometimes in a good light. And I've got people's attention, and I have to be somewhat brief with it. I've got 45 minutes, so I need to move through a number of different things because you're typically at the end of the day on a Friday, you're going to start losing people if you don't keep moving. And so I try to keep it lighthearted, try to keep it informational, but yet I try to keep it such that people know what they're getting and they know what's coming.
You seem like a natural at it. Do you do a lot of other CLE presentations?
No, I've done a few. I've done some at the University of Nebraska. I've done some for the firm has asked me to do them for clients that have in-house legal staffs. But pretty much the one I've done the most and focused on is the Creighton Omaha Bar Ethics Seminar. Well, as I mentioned earlier, Terry was one of my mentors, and I've always done work for the airport authority. While he was general counsel, I was basically handling their litigation. And not that they had a lot of litigation, but when they did, or they had disputes of whatever nature, I would get involved with those. So I had a bit of an entree or a bit of an opening to the airport work before I became general counsel. And then Terry and I overlapped for about a year where he knew he was going to phase out because he had some health issues. And then he eventually did, and so that's when I took over 2 years ago as general counsel. And I was still a member of McGrath North, still have other clients, but I focus primarily on the airport authority as general counsel. And then I call on other lawyers in the firm to help me do, for example, Steve Bogue has been our go-to person when it comes to collective bargaining and employment matters and union matters out at the airport. And we have other lawyers. Lee Hom has helped us on real estate matters and so on. And there's any number of different lawyers in the firm that have, at one time or another have done work for the airport authority. So I coordinate that. And then, of course, I handle all the issues with board of directors meetings, dealing with the directors, communicating with them, that sort of thing. And it's very challenging. I've had to get away from my traditional litigation work. I used to represent in litigation doctors and insurance companies. I did a lot of med-mal defense work. I did just a lot of insurance defense work. And I've had to give that work to other lawyers in the firm so that I could focus on airport authority work. And it's gone very well. I've been very lucky, very blessed. And so then when Terry passed away over 2 years ago is when I formally occupied the position. Not this office. I waited 2 years before I took over this office, and they finally said, you ought to go in there. So I used to be right next door. So. That's a compound question.
Yeah.
I object. No. In terms of comments or advice or suggestions for younger lawyers, I think they need to understand and keep in mind that their reputation is their stock and trade here. Their word is their stock and trade. So it's important, if they say they're going to do something, do it. If you make a commitment, don't make the other lawyer feel like they've got to verify it with an email or send you a letter confirming it. The most gratifying part of the practice to me is to have other lawyers respect you for your reputation. And so usually younger lawyers think, well, I don't have a reputation. I've just been practicing 2 or 3 years. Well, that's how you get one. They'd be surprised, I think, to learn how well you can develop a reputation, a good one, by just following the rules, being courteous, not sacrificing your client's interests, but just being somebody that others can trust. Whether it's judges, whether it's opposing counsel or not, it doesn't mean you're not a rabid litigator. It doesn't mean you're not looking at all the issues. But if you can generate that degree of trust on the part of the judge, it's automatically going to help you if you got it with the judge. And it certainly is a big deal to get it with opposing counsel, because there's so much you can do easier if they trust you, and obviously if you trust them. Now, if you don't trust them, that's a different story. But hopefully that's a minimum of the situations.
And you've practiced over the years, and you've seen technology come and some things change. Some things, though, stay the same.
Right.
But any crystal ball predictions about where we're going and about what stays the same?
Well, I don't know exactly what I would predict at this point. I do think that the use of Zoom and WebEx is here to stay. And so we're going to have more depositions done in that fashion. We're going to have more meetings run in that fashion. We're going to have less personal appearances. And I don't think that's necessarily bad, but there's always a time and place where you want to be face-to-face with somebody. You want to be have them right across the table from you. So I don't think we'll ever lose that, but it's going to be different now, because there's an expectation that you know how to do all those things, an expectation that you can save clients money by doing it that way. So I think that's probably the biggest change in direction. The other thing I would tell you is that something that is not a pet peeve of mine, but a pet issue of mine, is the way lawyers dress. It's become much more casual, and I pride myself in being able to wear a shirt and tie or a coat and tie, jacket and tie every day, not because I have to, but because I want to. And I think unfortunately we've lost that, and I don't know if it's ever coming back. But on the one hand, I've spent all the money for those ties. I'm going to wear them, by God. On the other hand, I do think that it makes a difference in terms of how the third parties, how the public views lawyers. And I think to the extent we can maintain our individuality while at the same time maintaining a well-dressed approach, you never have a second chance to make a good first impression, that sort of thing. I would like to see us get back to somewhat more of a formal wearing a tie, not just when you're going to court, not just when you're seeing clients, but more all of the time, so that we're distinguishable from accountants, or we're distinguishable from architects who maybe dress nicely in business casual, but could do more, and I think we should do more. So. Yeah, I would like to think that's a concept everybody can buy into.
Yeah. Any war stories that you want to get down for posterity's sake? You know, I've asked this. Some people defer. Some people have some story that they like to tell that they would.
Well, on the one hand, Dave, you don't have enough time for all the war stories I've got. I haven't been thinking of any off the top of my head. There's some I just can't tell in mixed company. I will tell you this: I had the privilege of representing a client here in Omaha who unfortunately got sued throughout the Southeast on a class action in terms of a product that they had been selling. And the lawyers on the other case, on the other side of the case, were the current and former presidents at the time of the American Trial Lawyers Association. So we had these well-seasoned veteran litigators that had national reputations, and there was McGrath North, and they were representing, with local counsel of course, but representing this client in these interactions. And they were very interesting because it got me an opportunity to see how things work in the South, how lawyer-client relationships, lawyer-judge relationships are different in the South. And we had one class action hearing where we met in the judge's jury room, and we were plaintiffs. It was kind of a preliminary settlement conference with the judge, and the lawyers for the plaintiffs class was there, and we were there. And the judge walked in and said, "Okay, what are we here for?" And the plaintiff's lawyer said, his name was Russ Herman. He said, "Judge, we're here to talk to you about getting this case settled." And the judge said, he started to read from a list of prepared remarks to the counsel, and the lawyer, I think it was Russ Herman, reached across and just put his arm down like that. He said, "Judge, we don't need to mess with all that stuff. We've got all that done. We just need you to tell us it's okay to go forward." And I thought, wow. And the judge took his instructions quite well from plaintiff's counsel, and did. And we were in litigation with that same law firm later on a related matter, and we were taking depositions at his office in New Orleans. And things got particularly heated where I was asking questions of his client. He was objecting, and he was upset about something, and he got up and he stood up at the table and pointed his finger at me. He says, "You, sir, are a prevaricator." And I looked at him and I said, "Well, I think I'd be upset if I knew what that meant, but since I don't know what that word means, I'm going to continue on." So I got a lot of those types of stories, but some of them, like I say, I can't tell. But
I'm sure he was a very well-dressed gentleman, right?
Oh, yes, yeah.
So this is for my own personal edification. J. Scott Paul, choice. Did you choose to go by Scott? Did your parents choose Scott? Is it a family name? Why is it like that?
My parents wanted to name me. They wanted to call me Scott, but being a Catholic, they wanted me to have a patron saint name, and that was the tradition at the time, maybe still is. So they thought, we'll call him John, so he'll have a patron saint name, but we'll just use the initial J, and middle name Scott, we'll call him J. Scott or Scott, and that's how that came about. It's one of those things where, I get called all kinds of things, because my last name is also a first name. I get called Paul, I get called Scott, I get called J. Scott. I mean, I get, hey, stupid. I answer to them all. So,
any attorneys in the family before you, or any attorneys on the way coming through?
No. Well, yes and no. No attorneys in my family. I was the first one, and my daughter married an attorney, and I have 3 kids: Kyle, Bridget, and Sean. Sean's the youngest. He's an attorney here in Omaha, and then my daughter, as I said, married an attorney. His father is an attorney. My daughter's sister-in-law is an attorney. Her husband's an attorney. So between the Collins family and the Paul family, we have lots of attorneys. So.
Well, it speaks well that she married into an attorney family.
I didn't scare her off. Yeah, that was nice.
Anything that I missed that you want for the good of the order to add in there?
No, I don't think so, Dave. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I'll be surprised if anybody's still watching at this point of the video, but if they are, we should thank them for sticking with it for all this time.
Well, thanks for the time, and we'll see you on May 2nd at the Law Day lunch.
Sounds good. Thank you.